Now let's see closure properties of context-free languages. So what is the closure property? We already know, right? So closure property says that if we take a language L and if it belongs to a particular class, then even after applying that operation on that L, if it still belongs to this same class, then we say that this language is closed under this operation. Correct? So first let's start with union. Union is one operation which needs two elements to be applied, right? So to do union we need always two sets, correct? So we take two languages L1 and L2 which are context free. Then we should say whether L1 union L2 is context free or not. If it is context free, we say that context free languages are closed under union. Not just for one example, if it is context free always, then only we can say that it's the context free languages are closed under union. How do we check whether union is a context free language or not? Always for any given language we should prove, right? It's not that we take an example and prove because it works for that example doesn't mean that it works for every example. So how do we prove that? So if L1 is a context free, there will be a grammar that has start symbol S1, right? Because L1 is a context free, so it should have a context free grammar. Similarly, if L2 is a context free grammar, then it should have a context free grammar. Let's assume that the start variable of that is S2. Then if I construct a new variable which derives S1 or S2, then this is nothing but L1 union L2, right? Because S can derive all the strings of S1 or all the strings of S2. That means it can derive all the strings that can be derived from S1 and all the strings that can be derived from S2. So this S is nothing but L1 union L2. So I write remaining grammar rules as it is for S1 and S2 and I add new rule like this which will construct L1 union L2 because it can generate all the strings that can be generated from S1 and it can generate all the strings that can be generated from S2. That means S can derive all the strings that are part of L1 union L2. So now it is also a context free grammar, right? Because I have added this rule, it is not violating any context free grammar condition. So that means there is a new language for which I have a context free grammar. So whenever there is a context free grammar, that is called a context free language, right? So that's why L1 for L1 and union L2 there exists a context free grammar, so that is a context free language. So L1 and union L2 is a context free language if L1 comma L2 are context free languages. That means context free languages are closed under union. Correct? Because we know how to construct grammar from those two individual languages to union language. So they are closed under union. Now let's see context free languages are closed under concatenation or not. That means there are two context free languages L1 comma L2. Now we should check L1 followed by L2 is a context free or not. We know that these two are CFLs. How do we check that? So we don't know whether the concatenation will be context free or not, right? But we know that L1 is context free. Again same thing we will try to prove using the grammar rules. So it will have a grammar which has starting with start variable as S1 and L2 will also have a grammar which has S2 as start variable. Now how do I construct a grammar using these individual start variables for concatenation language? Concatenation means there can be any string that is from L1 followed by some string from L2, right? So that means, can I write like this? If I can derive, S1 can derive any string that is part of L1 and S2 can derive any string that is part of L2. So if I add a new rule like this, then it can generate all the strings that are concatenation of S1 and S2 that can be derived from S1 followed by S2. That means if I add this new start variable, it derives all the strings that are part of L1 concatenation with L2. So because there exists a context free grammar, again this is not violating the context free grammar rules, right? So even if I add this new rule, it is still be a context free grammar. So because there exists a context free grammar for this, so we say that it's a CFL. So these are closed under concatenation. So CFLs are closed under concatenation operation. Now let's see context free languages are closed under clean closure or not. What is clean closure means? So if L1 is a CFL, then we should know L1 star is CFL or not. So how do we check that L1 star is CFL or not? That means it should have epsilon or all the strings of L1 or all the strings of L1 concatenation with L1 or all the strings of L1 concatenation with L1, so on, right? So this is clean closure of this language. So how do we know that this is a context free language or not? Again we use the grammar rules to prove that it's a context free. So how do we do that? Again there will be a start variable for L1, right? So that is, assume it is S1 and it derives some strings. So now how do we construct a grammar for L1 star using this S1? That means I take a new start variable S, it can directly derive S1 or followed by S1, that SS. That means I can repeat this any number of times. Again S can be replaced with SS1, again S can be replaced with SS1, but the final replacement of S should be epsilon. That means I can repeat S1 any number of times, right? So including 0 number of times. So this covers epsilon, and if I substitute epsilon here, one instance of S1. If again I derive SS1 and then substitute epsilon, two instances of S1. S1 doesn't means, that means all the strings of L1 concatenation with again strings of L1, right? So in this way, if I add this rule, it can derive all the strings that are part of L1 star. So L1, again for L1 star, I can have a context free grammar. So this is also a CFL. That means CFLs are closed under clean closure. What about positive closure? What is positive closure? Positive closure means one or more occurrence. That means L1 plus. I should not have epsilon. Instead, I should have at least one L1 or L1 followed by L1, so on. So how do I generate strings like that? Simple. I should just modify a small rule. So here same thing, but instead of epsilon, I should have at least one S1. So the final replacement of S should be at least one S1. Then I can derive L1 if I use this production, or if I replace with this, finally ultimately this S has to be replaced with this S1. That means I can get L1 concatenation with L1, so on. So but I will never have epsilon, that means 0 occurrences of L1. So then in this way I can derive all the strings of positive closure of L1. Now let's see CFLs are closed under reversal or not. What is reversal of a language? The language has a string X, then L reversal will have reversal of X, right? So that means if the language is in the form of A power n, B power n, then L reversal will, if L is this, L reversal will be B power n, A power n, right? So all the strings reversal will be part of this reversal language. So how do I know whether the reversal of a context free is context free or not? So it will be a context free because I know how to construct grammar for reversal. So assume that there is, because L is already context free, L is a CFL, so there will be a grammar. Let's assume that has S as the start variable and it derives all the productions of this form. Right? It can be a variable or terminal or whatever it is. Now I want to derive all reversal strings. That means I should, instead of, assume this is a ABC string, then what should I derive in S reversal? I should derive CBA. So how do I construct a grammar for reversal language? Reverse all productions of L. G, which is CFG for L. Right? If I reverse all the productions, then it will derive a reversal language, because assume there is a production like this. Then if I reverse these productions, then what will it become? S derives BA, A derives, because there is only one element, reversal of it will be same as that, B derives B. Then what is the final string that can be derived from this is BA. Here it is AB. So in this way, we know that if I reverse all the productions for any given grammar, the language that is going to be generated from that grammar will be reversal of the given language. So because I know how to construct context free grammar for reversal, that means there exists a context free grammar for reversal language. So it's a context free language. So they are closed under reversal operation as well. CFLs are closed under reversal operation. Let's see one more property of CFL, that is homomorphism. So we will see whether CFLs are closed under homomorphism or not. So suppose assume that our sigma is 0, 1, then we will have homomorphic definitions for that like this. Assume that it is something like this, and then maybe it is like this. Then we are defining what should be my homomorphic definitions for 0 and for 1. So suppose there is a language over sigma which is CFL. Then we want to know H of L1 is CFL or not. So is it a CFL? So it is CFL because we are simply substituting 0. We are substituting ABA in place of 0 and BB in place of 1. Assume because L1 is a CFL, there will be a grammar G which has some productions like this, right? Some things like this, and finally there will be some single terminals like this. So wherever we see 0, that we will replace with ABA, and wherever we see 1, that will get replaced with BB. So overall, whatever language we get after replacing 0, 1, so it will still be context free grammar, so it will be a context free language. So CFLs are closed under homomorphism. Now what about inverse homomorphism? Inverse homomorphism also is similar. Suppose now I define inverse homomorphism like this. Whenever there is a ABA, replace with 0. Whenever there is BB, replace with 1. So if I find ABA string, then it should be replaced with 0, and if I find BB string, it should be replaced with 1. So I can again prove that it's a context free language either by using grammar or by PDA. In PDA, assume that there are moves which are accepting ABA and pushing something in the stack. Assume that it is XY, then we will replace that ABA with 0 and then we push the same symbol. Again for BB, assume we are pushing or popping something. Then for BB, we replace that with 1 and we will not change anything in the stack. In that way, we can prove that they are closed under homomorphism and inverse homomorphism. So CFLs are closed under both of those operations. Now let's see some properties of DCFL languages. So we are taking a specific subpart of CFL. So overall there can be many CFLs, but DCFLs are part of it, right? So there can be some CFLs which are not deterministic, that we already know. Now we will see whether they are closed under union. When we say whether they are closed under union, that means I take L1, L2 which are DCFLs. Then I want to check whether union is a DCFL or not. We know that CFLs are closed under union. That means if there are two CFLs, union is a CFL. But will it be a DCFL as well is the question. Suppose now this is not a DCFL. We will see what is the proof now. But let's think why it is not a DCFL. Because DCFL means it should have, for any possible input, it should have only one transition defined, right? So whatever be the state, like assume there is a state Q and the input is X and the stack contains something, then it should have only one transition defined. If it has more than one transition, then it is going to be a non-deterministic thing, right? So How do we know that for union we are not going to get DCFL? So we should take an example where it might violate the DCFL condition. So union tries to get all the strings from either L1 or L2. So if there is any conflicting condition between L1 comma L2, that is where it will introduce non-determinism, right? So let's take L1 as A power n, B power n, C star. And L2 is A star, B power n, C power n. Now union, so here this is a DCFL because I push all the A's for every B, I pop A, and if by the time I completely read B's, if there are no A's in the stack, then I change the state and I see where there are any C's and I just loop in that. And after that I go to a final state. Here also I neglect all the A's, I don't take any action, but once I start getting B, I push all the B's, and for every C I pop one B, and then after consuming all the input, if there are no B's in the stack, then I say that it's a CFL, right? Both of them are DCFLs because I can deterministically know like for what input symbol what should be my action. But if I do union, what is union condition? Either A should be equal to B's or B should be equal to C's. That means in this case, if I am checking for this condition, I want to push all the A's and for every B I want to pop A. But if I want to, suppose I am getting input string like this. So the moment I get A, I don't know whether I should push A or I should neglect because it could have equal number of B's or C's in future, or it could be like this. I don't know, right? When I see the first symbol, I don't know whether it's going to be like this or like this. So I don't know whether I should simply neglect A's or I should push A's. That's why for first symbol itself I have non-determinism. That's why union sometimes may introduce non-determinism. That's why DCFLs are not closed under union. That means union of two DCFLs might not be a DCFL. It will still be a CFL. Though it has non-determinism, it can go to this class, but in some cases it might not be a DCFL. Let's see whether DCFLs are closed under complement or not. So we take a language L1 which is a DCFL. Now the question is whether L1 bar is DCFL or not. So is it a DCFL? So for CFLs we know that they are not closed under complement. But for DCFL, is there a chance that that can belong to the same class if we take the complement? Yes, because in DCFL for every state means state and the input symbol and the stack, there is only one possible transition, right? So what I do is, I make assume this, there is a DPDA for this DCFL. Using final state mechanism, there is a PDA. Then what I do is, in that PDA, I again interchange all the final states to non-final and non-final to final, non-final to final and final to non-final. Then it will exactly accept the complement language, right? So whatever string in this PDA is leading to final state will go to a non-final state now. And for whatever string I am going to a final state, non-final state, I am going to final state in the complement. So there can be a construction through which I can say that there exists again deterministic PDA for this language. So it is closed under complement. Then why can't we do same thing for CFLs? Why are we doing it only for DCFLs? For CFLs we can't do this because for some state and some same input, there can be two moves, and assume one of them is final, one of them is non-final. Then when we interchange, we make this as non-final and we make this as final. That means the same string will still be accepted, right? Why we are interchanging the states? We are interchanging final, non-final to reject whatever was being accepted and to accept whatever was being rejected. But assume this is same input symbol. Previously it was getting accepted in this path, now it is getting accepted in this path. That means we are not actually complementing the language. Because of the non-determinism, we couldn't complement the language. What if we make both of them as non-final? Then there might be some cases where it was going to non-final before and even now it is going to a non-final state. So that also we don't want to happen, right? So that's why for normal PDA we cannot have a construction for complement, but whereas for DPDA it is easy. So that's why for DPDA, because we can have complement PDA and which is again deterministic, because we haven't changed any transition, so there will not be any non-determinism. So that's why they are closed under complement. DCFLs are closed under complement, but CFLs are not closed under complement.